What's up, everybody? Today on the Yours Truly podcast, I'm pleased to welcome Food Truck Emily into some conversation craft here in the virtual studio today. Emily and I both dropped into participation in this little corner of the internet practically at the same time. To be precise, her introduction video was uploaded on January 9th and mine just 3 days earlier on January 6th of this year. I have no idea if she saw mine before she posted hers, but regardless, there was actually a wave of new people showing up to play in this little corner, all happening after the channel Waves of Obsession popped out of lurkerdom with a video he released on January 1st of this year entitled Find the Others, where he actually mapped TLC channels and their YouTube participation and encouraged others to make a channel and put handles to faces, so to speak. As Emily and I were stumbling into this, at the time, even more nebulous YouTube space known as this little corner of the internet, we both were bumping into each other on Paul Vanderklay's channel, me doing a speed rando and her doing a full proper randos conversation with Paul. We both found our way onto Grim Grizz's Broken Clock Tower Discord, both having little experience with Discord before, and also began to join into some Grail Country live stream conversations as well. Emily and I had something else in common. We were our worship leaders, having been involved in the modern church rock and roll worship scene. Also, both mightily impacted by the online work of one Jordan B. Peterson through his earlier videos on YouTube. We were both right around the same age. Our stories are different, and you can find her full journey over on Paul Vanderklay's channel. Link will be in the description. But yet, we share the same morphic resonance of life and faith being helped by Jordan Peterson and feeling a big part of our lives being understood by the community built by Paul Vanderklay here on YouTube, as well as life itself being lived as a song to sing to and along with the life of the Christian church. A month or so ago, I did a channel update and asked for suggestions. One suggestion was to have Emily on the podcast. So I took that suggestion to heart, and I am excited to get to connect with Emily on these points of convergence previously mentioned here today on the Yours Truly podcast. So without any further ado, I give you Food Truck Emily Rajeh.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.
What's up?
Oh, hey. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's fun. It's a fun thing. I had a conversation last week, and he was like, "Yeah, I feel like it kind of gets there, gets in your head, or kind of it's like an icebreaker for this thing." So, yeah, I'm continuing to go with it, doing it live. It's fun, and welcome. And thank you for coming and wanting to have a conversation today.
Oh, I mean, I'm flattered that anybody wants to talk to me ever. So,
well, I think the thing is like there's certain things that just made sense in this space, like the Jordan Peterson thing, the Paul Vanderklay thing, and you're just taking all this in. Like you said in that conversation, you're like, I listened to all 200 hours of, it's like you take in, and then he's kind of this figure that, was kind of complicated to talk about, in different ways. And so then it's like
become increasingly so, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah, we can get into that. Maybe not as far as the more contentious things in culture going on right now. But I wanted to start on a lighter topic. So, which was when I watched your Paul Vanderklay conversation, it was obvious that you read a lot. Are you reading anything right now? That speaking of icebreakers,
well,
I'm going to start there.
I don't know if you caught that. I'm also very ADD. So
okay.
My interest, it from even day to day or something will just like grab me. So yeah, I have a lot of stuff going on. I have, from history books. I'm in the middle of a Chesterton book right now. I've been doing John Mark Comer's Practicing the Way. And I hope that we get to talk about him a little bit too, because that's another thing, like in this corner, whenever people talk about him, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I'm in the middle of some C.S. Lewis. Like, so when I came back to any kind of semblance of faith or the church, I felt like I had like all these friends I hadn't talked to in 20 years, meaning like my books, all these authors, you know. And I've just been honestly like rereading a bunch of stuff that I've read before, just kind of like reacquainting myself, you know.
What are some of the titles you said? Lewis, what are you doing with Lewis? Which one are you looking at?
Well, I binged several. I'm really bad at remembering names and titles off the top of my head. So yeah, I did like Mere Christianity, Screw Tape, The Problem of Pain. Went through a lot of his essays. So all of like the God and the Dog kind of essay compilations, the Weight of Glory.
That's a lot.
What?
That's a lot.
Well, it's been 2 years. I mean.
Oh, okay. I see.
And I went back, and especially this past year, I've been rereading a lot of Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer was a really big influence on me, especially in my 20s. A lot of like The Cost of Discipleship, and then Life Together, and then getting more into his biography stuff. So I've read more things about him, and then a lot of a collection of his letters. There's a book about just his sermons on the Psalms and things like that. And what else? I'm trying to think too. The Chesterton book that I'm really enjoying too. I see the title of it just like went out of my head.
It's interesting. So, you know, a lot of this will be like my reference from what I've listened back to parts of your conversation with Paul, listened to it all, you know, when it came out. So I have kind of a sense of your story. And one being, when you said that about Bonhoeffer, and it automatically thinks of, you know, this kind of, you know, intense, Christian experience that he had, and your Christian experience, it was like you were practicing in an intensity in your. That's one thing that I pick. He's like, you know, you were kind of doing some type, a little bit of an ascetic lifestyle, like, you know, getting up and early and praying and all these things. And that when you said I was listening to him in my 20s, I was like, I wonder if that was, you know, part of this just like intensity you were connecting with and feeling.
Oh, well, probably one of the first books I got my hands on when I was young was the Systematic Theology of Charles Finney. So if you want to talk about intensity, and I don't even know how that was my jumping in spot. You know, I think it was really, there were just books that were on my dad's bookshelf, and I just started pulling them off. It's, you know, it's not like I had YouTube back then, or really was finding this stuff on the internet, although I'm sure I did at some point too. But I was so, you know, I had this for me, very radical personal experience in a conversion. Mm-hmm. And that came, I mean, it was very transformative in so many ways. But then like after that first part, it was like, okay, now what? Now, like, and then I remember reading, who wrote How Should We Then Live?
Chuck Colson? Is that his name?
I don't know. I'm really bad at that. Just FYI, for like the rest of this conversation, I can't think of songs, bands, like all that stuff off the top of my head. I'm really, really bad at that. I'm
looking it up, but keep going.
I very immediately, like, I felt as just a sense of urgency for the church, for my personal life, for the people around me. I was literally having dreams all the time about it. And also it was just like, I had just experienced this incredibly transformative and healing experience. And I was dealing, you know, the initial like overcoming of certain elements of like trauma, you know, felt like a new person. And then, I was very, what's the word? Yeah, just very intense. That's the word that people my whole life have used to describe me. And I try to tamper that down as much as I possibly can. I think I've gotten better, you know?
Yeah. I've been probably similar. It's fun. Yeah, it was Chuck Colson. And the only reason I can remember that, because are you 40, 39? I can't remember. You're
40.
close. Yeah, so I'm 39. So back
Good
in
for you.
still
You look
holding
great.
on, thanks. The youth group days, those were some of the books, you're talking about Bonhoeffer. Like during that time, we were both like in that same period, the things that were being passed around by like our youth interns or like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it was, and it's
You knew
interesting.
people that were reading that?
Yeah.
Shoot, I did not.
What do you? See, I didn't read it. I was just around the people,
Oh,
or I'd be like, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna go through this book," and I would show up, but I wouldn't read it. Like
yeah.
that was that guy, So I have like this.
How old was that for you?
I don't know, between
Like
between
teenager,
15, between 15 and 18, and
Okay.
then I got an undergrad in like biblical studies, so I was around all those guys continuing to talk about in the Baptist world during that time. So, but yeah, that's similar note. I wasn't let's see. I was very passionate about like wanting to be a part of like doing things with ministry or the church and through music, but I wasn't I still like to have a good time, I guess. I didn't want to like, there were things I didn't want to be so extreme about. Like I had a friend that when he became a Christian, like he wouldn't even speed like ever. Like he felt guilty
so
if
this
he was.
was you're describing me. It was like
Yeah. Okay.
it's like I knew it was legalistic, but I had a really hard time reconciling things with each other. Like, okay, but if I know I'm doing something that's wrong, why am I still doing it? And if I'm supposed to obey the laws, I had like this constant in my head, and it made it really hard for me to, in relationships in general. But you had that conversation with that bird guy.
Oh yeah.
What's his name?
Ross.
You talk about like the priest stuff, and if there's anything like, well, the idea that I had in my mind is that we were all to be that. We were all called to that. And that I was looking around and there's just people, you could not distinguish people from the culture. I also had no sense of that anyone else felt a sort of urgency or even like a deeper desire to know God, to be like God, to be with God. Like I didn't see people were doing any of the things. And I was reading the Bible for my first time, and I just thought like there's a huge disconnect from any semblance of, instantiation of church here versus what I see here, or the people that even follow Jesus. So then I started getting into even reading a lot of those like biographies or autobiographies from people who lived under like persecuted church. I started reading like Chinese theologians like Watchman Nee. Like I was trying to figure out, why was it like this here? Why did I feel a sense of urgency that I didn't feel like a lot of other people did? Is that just my personality? And then I know I'm kind of all over the place right now, but even my interest in understanding theology was because I was trying to grapple with, the ideas of sanctification. How much are we to expect that our lives are sanctified? How much are we to expect to be set apart, to be overcoming of sin? Like, I just felt like we should be able to actually overcome sin. Otherwise, I just didn't understand the meaning of the gospel. And to this day, this is a conversation that I have often with people. I'm like, what is the gospel if it's not transformative, if we're not overcoming? And this is, again, my interest in the practicing the way. And I think broadly, like in the religious world, and I can't speak for everything, but I feel like from listening to all these conversations everywhere, there's been this huge move back to orthodoxy, not necessarily just like the Orthodox Church, but orthodoxy and like the fundamentals, the actual apprenticeship to Jesus, the practicing the way. What are these rituals and things that we have lost, or maybe they're very thinly coded in the things that we do in modern day church or in evangelical church or Protestant church, whatever. I just want to tap on, Vander Clay did that interview with, I think his name was Chris Green.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got it. I got one of the names right. And I remembered him because it reminded me of Keith Green. But anyway.
Yeah. That's funny because I said Keith Green on a live stream the other night.
Did I comment on it? No, that was
No,
a different one.
it was somebody did though. Somebody commented on it.
Well,
Yeah.
well, speaking of which, so Keith Green was my very first like musical icon that
Interesting.
I was obsessed with even as a child before I mean, in fact, like I would pray like every single night and I'd ask God to give messages to Keith Green. Like, this is ridiculous. But I was so interested in his life because he kind of embodied that just super passion. His songs to the church, I felt like were very pointed and very meaningful and true in the way kind of like Derek Webb, I feel like sort of picked up that torch a little bit later on. But yeah, so I felt the thing that just really possesses me a lot is just this idea of bringing back orthodoxy, meaningful practices, how to set ourselves apart in the world, and how these practices are there to transform us, to make us more like Jesus, to facilitate us in being with him. And yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That was actually one thing I was kind of interested in talking to you about because, I mean, from what I guess I don't know, but you know, you're involved in like, you know, a satellite campus of North Point, or at least you were last time I heard anything.
I am. I still
And
do
so,
worship with them.
yeah, and so, and I've been in like, you know, evangelicalism, non-denom, kind of somewhere between Baptist and Presbyterian for a long time now, and when you know, when you're the practitioner of the worship thing, it's an interesting thing because it's even different than being like the preacher, but you've been a part of being the liturgy practitioner for a long time. Because I even was listening to you said you did worship back, I don't know what the age is, when you were doing for YWAM, and you would do like, you know, these soak sessions, this hour long, you know, or a multiple hour long type.
Oh yeah, I mean, but yeah, with YWAM, with regular like non-denomination churches, youth groups.
Yes.
And then I traveled with YWAM, so everywhere I went, I was, you know, worship.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, been there, but when you encounter this, these other parts of worship like liturgy and even just the aesthetic parts, because you're also have been involved with lights and smoke, and it's like, okay, you know, I'm also seeing lots of colors and smoke in these pictures too, and but they, you know, it's not arbitrary. And I guess in the settings that you and I have been in over the years, it's like, it's not that it's like, oh, this, you know, this does create an atmosphere, but you don't think that there's anything spiritually significant attached to it. Does that make sense? Well, I'm not, yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that
people like take for granted the atmosphere, and they don't really think a lot into what.
Well, they don't take it for granted. They don't. It's a secular, like, it's like, this creates an environment, but there's nothing. You can't really put anything theological behind it.
So I wonder about that, and I don't have like.
I'm not saying there isn't.
That I play with in my head is kind of, sometimes I feel like we might even have arbitrary distinctions between secular and sacred.
Yes.
For example, when I can, you know, like Jordan Peterson's talked about before, like you can be in these settings and it's a worshipful experience, you know, like in, would you like secular concerts or something like that? You know what I mean? I feel like, and I could be wrong. Like, I'm not a theologian, but there's something that happens inside of us that makes the thing sacred. You know, I could be having a very sacred experience. Someone else could be having a completely secular experience, and no matter what context you're in. So sometimes, like, I've had people criticize even like North Point, the church that I'm in, and I kind of play devil's advocate with it, because like a lot of the commentary will be like, it's not sacred, because they feel like there's like to them what sacred means is more of a somber,
reverent.
Of reverence, and to them what reverence means is that somber kind of seriousness with it. And I've noticed that sometimes those comments come when it's more of a joyful set list or something, you know, and that to them just seems irreverent. And then I'm like, yeah, well, King David also like was dancing in front of the ark when his, perhaps that was irreverently or whatever. So we have like different perceptions of the sacred and the secular. And it's, again, something I grapple with almost every single week, And something I've thought about too is like, Sherry has described like going into an Orthodox church, and there's something about it that's like reflective of nature, whether it's the shape, the architecture. There are things that just like point you to whatever. And I think that's probably true with all of the transcendental like things, everything that's true, beautiful, and good, even to where I think we recreate that in the worship setting, even when we're in a box church where nothing about the church is, what's the word? Nothing that would, that would cause us to worship, about those like ugly carpets and whatever. But then the music happens, and there's something in the way, the way that the guitar swells, the way that the drums roll, like there's something that does recreate, I feel like, other elements. Like we're trying to create that same kind of transcendent experience through music. The thing that I've often struggled with as a worship leader is that I feel like that music is so powerful. And that you are setting the temperature of a room often because like as a musician, like when I throw in this minor key, or when I do, like, that you're evoking certain emotions. I've been in settings where the pastor is actually like wanted me to do this because I want them to be in this mood or this mood. And then like something inside of me is like, well, because I know that part of what we do is, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but we do sort of guide emotional response to things. And I feel like that's a heavy responsibility. And I often think about that, in what we're doing. But that being said, worship, even with all like the fog and the stuff that feels really like what they use in the world, it's all part of that. We're creating an experience. And I've seen really amazing things happen in that experience when I'm busy being critical of it, but then someone was having a profound experience, So does that make sense?
Yeah, I've
Is that what you were talking about, or were you?
Yeah, I think that, let's see. So a couple of things. Like when you make the comment about the pastor saying, I want them to be this way or that way. I've been in so many situations, similar, even if it's implied or whatever. I would say the difference between something like that and like a really high, smells and bells liturgy is that in the smells and bells liturgy, it's explicit. We are doing these things, and these things, we're not going to hide the fact that these things are supposed to elicit awe. Like we're not going to like it's not, it's where with the pastor, it's like, I want to elicit this, but I don't want it. If we say we are, then it's not authentic. Whereas
like if it's planned, if they know that it's planned and it's part of the,
so as opposed to in some of those higher settings, it's explicitly the architecture, everything is trying, it's saying we want this to elicit, a transcendent, sacred experience.
Well, and I wonder too if some of that's also, that's kind of understood when you walk into those places. And I kind of feel like with music, maybe some of that's also just understood. It doesn't have to be necessarily explicit. Yeah. Actually, I'm not even sure that's explicit. I think that's sort of implied. I don't think they tell people, okay, by the way, when you walk in here, you're going to feel a sense of awe. And it's just, it's the architecture. We created it so that it would, I don't feel like we necessarily explain everything.
Sure. It's a symbol. It's like a symbol. Yeah.
See, these are the things that I don't know where I land on it. I just know that somehow God does some things in places where I'm being super critical of it, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. The thing about, I guess, because you are a very good singer. you have a very good voice. Early on, you tagged me in a video and like, we should be a TLC worship thing, and I was like, that your song was very good. And when you're, when this thing is deeply inside of your being and your development, like I have drums, keyboard, 2 guitars in here right now. Like don't everything. I'm having to try to sometimes keep myself from like Martin Luthering myself about music, being like, it's just who I am. Like you have to like accept that about yourself.
Right.
And yes, there are things sometimes happen when you don't think anything's happening.
Always, actually, always.
Yeah. And can be surprised. The thread I was wanting to go back to was the let's see. Oh, music itself is the other piece of this. So within the culture of, I actually was having a long conversation with my dad about this kind of last night, because he was actually like my youth pastor during a lot of this time. And we were talking about like in our small town when contemporary / modern worship was trying to like bust up the stuffy world of late 90s, early 2000s, small town America or at large, he was excited about it. And he was trying to get kids to have this stuff. And it really was a type of movement. And now that we're 20, 30 years like down that road, I think sometimes we're still trying to want it to have the authenticity of that season and that was in our lives, and I think sometimes I'm like, I just, in certain settings, that's like so actually very far removed from that experience of like organically like finding this song that someone was singing at this conference that like you're like you bring it home, but now that's just not
to the congregation and stuff like that.
Like that's not how that works anymore. It's like
oh man, you just reminded me of the worship conferences.
Yeah. And so what I guess what I'm trying to say is I've kind of come to this place where I'm at right now. Doesn't mean I'll always be this way, but that I feel like in that part of the church that music is being asked to hold more than it should.
Oh yeah.
So to your point about its power and what it can do, and that there's art connected to it, is like 100%. It's that there's like that when you have to almost put like half the service's meaning into the music, that's you're asking it to do maybe more than what it's could or should be maybe intended to do for a part of worship. That's what I would say about that.
That's very interesting. There are some times when I feel like music actually, maybe it should be carrying more of the weight. And there's a reason I feel like we do so much talking and ingesting of ideas, and that's not actually where, you talk like, again, between like the explicit and the implicit, there are things that need to happen inside of us that sometimes like all the words in the world, because that's all being filtered through your logic, your reasoning, and what you're able to understand. And there's a lot of things that we aren't able to understand that can only be unlocked through embodying worship. And it's something I really paid attention to, like when I was in Africa, for example. It's the first time I really thought about it this way, which is how much music was a full body experience. You did not sing a song in Africa where everyone was not on their feet, dancing, clapping, the most joyous expressions on their faces, no matter what was going on in their lives, whatever. And I just remember thinking like, that was a new experience. I'm used to like a whole style that everyone knows what we're doing here, and we stand and sometimes people raise their hand, you know what I mean? Like, but there is something, and the more I learned, and this is going to like, I'm going to mix a lot of things in together, because during my off season with Christianity, I went like full into like studying like the mind body connection. That was a big obsession of mine for a long time. There was like the polyvagal theory. Stephen Porges did a whole thing, and I started understanding where a lot of these processes were happening, and whether it be in things that we're not aware of. We are not, like, I am not aware of all the things that are happening in my body while I'm talking to you. Like your nervous system is picking up on things, expressions in other people, and it's telling you a story, and it's also what's helping you to respond, whatever. So my point with that is that there's so many, and I also got into the emotional freedom technique, you know, like there's tapping, EMDR, where again, you're accessing nervous system and parts of your brain that you're not, they're not in your awareness yet. And then back to what Vanderklay's been talking a lot about lately, which is IFS, the internal family systems. It's bringing the things that are latent, that are in your subconscious or your unconscious, and then bringing them into your awareness. But you are surrounded by people with such low levels of awareness that are so low on the ego awareness spectrum. And sometimes you can talk all day at them about doctrine, about theology, about God, but you are actually invoking so many things in them that you don't know, because words are, what do we say, like magic spells. You know, you don't know which magic spells you're using when you're talking to thousands of people for each individual person. What music does is it is, I don't know. I don't have the words for it. Maybe that's the whole point, it's because it's beyond words. I have had people come and tell me, like, I'll be singing a song and I'll actually be kind of critical of the song because, okay, it's the song you might know called Pieces. You know Pieces?
I'm pretty behind these days, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's the one, it's like unreserved, something. And it's like basically comparing that God's love is nothing like man's love. And you don't give your heart in pieces. You don't, I don't know the words off the top of my head. Anyway, and it's a little bit like, okay, it sounds almost like a love song or something. And I had someone reach out to me after that service saying that they sobbed through the whole thing because they're in a loveless marriage, and that I am getting teared up thinking about it, that their deep desire for intimate connection and to be known and to know, and this longing that they had, while they were singing that song, it was just revealed to them. It came up to their understanding that our desires here on earth may be left unsatisfied as far as our human, but that God can meet, and that his love for us is not like, he is not rejecting you. He's not pulling away from you. He isn't incapable of meeting you. You know what I mean? In that they just really broke open something in her. And it was because you're singing these certain phrases over and over. You're like, I often, when I'm praying before I sing or whatever, it's like I'm speaking truth. I'm speaking truth over their lives, and I'm inviting them in. I'm asking God, in this music, in this atmosphere, please cut through all of our human crap and all of our failings. And we don't really know what the hell we're doing here, but if you could please, I know there's people that are either on the edge of their chair, can't wait to get out that exit, and there are people on the edge of their seat, desperate for a word from a living God. And in whatever part that I play in that, I'm inviting his spirit in there to meet them in this really imperfect thing that we don't know what we're doing, you know? And I do think that he does. And I guess my point is that music does carry a lot of the weight in that, because our understanding is very limited. And when a pastor gets up and talks to a group of people, we're just we're on so many different levels, you know? And sometimes either it does so much work in preparing the heart to receive, or to calm down the nervous system, like maybe to get them into a sort of reverent, worshipful, I just experienced beauty and goodness, and I just meditated on these truths. And now I feel a little bit like I could probably hear from somebody right now, you know? So I know what you're saying, as in terms of music carries a lot. I just wonder if maybe it's by necessity, because I think music has been a crucial part of worship for as long as we know.
Yep.
Every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every group has used music in their connecting to God, their worship, their reverence, all that stuff, you know.
I think there's I'm going to see if I can hold on to like 3 or 4 things in there.
Sorry, I know I'm like,
That's all right. I'm because you know, these are the things that, you know, I also have spent a lot of years like in my brain, you know, about as well. And so let's see, one about you. So going back to the embodied part, like you even mentioned the tribes in Africa. And I think it kind of does depend on the context. Several of these things depend on a certain types, because we can say modern worship, but that can mean like,
modern,
you know, a lot of different settings. It can mean a lot of different levels of how something is manifested in it, and even in the objective nature of tone, pitch, rhythm, quality. Like those things are not always probably providing a platform of meditation. It's sometimes it depending on your sensibilities, it could be, you know, like,
oh yeah,
I don't know if I can stay in this room. So, but we can still call this modern worship, right? So
yes, it does need to be beautiful. It does need to be beautiful. It does need to be good, and it does need to have some element of
people within argue. Uh-oh, you okay? You're okay. Oh no, we lost him. She got a call. All right, so we were just talking. I was responding to you, kind of that last section you were talking about on worship, and so I talked about I can't remember what I was just saying about that, but
the embodied, the full body expression.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. I remember asking for feedback, you know, from people at church and different things, and one of them was a friend of mine. I was like, what would help you? And he was like, actually, if there was like more times of like, not like maybe music or not
space.
Yes, more space. And that was so surprising because for the leader, and maybe you had times like this. I went through a season where I was uncomfortable with allowing space, you know, because it felt like, you know, if you do that, it was probably me projecting that people were going to be self-conscious when I was the one that was actually self-conscious during that time. You know, what do I do with myself? But that actually gave me a lot of that one, you know, because he was a very introverted, quiet person. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And it allowed me to be like, oh, we could do 8 bars here instead of cutting it in half, or like, you know, or in between the songs, not feeling like I have to rush, like thinking about, it's always helped me to think about people, like even like specific people in that regards, which is, I mean, the other parts, because you talked about the embodied nature of like full body jumping, clapping, like that, you know, King David to the tribes in Africa. And the interesting thing about like that to me represents like a side of embodied on a spectrum, because the other I think there's an embodied reverence, which isn't just about standing still and listening, but like something like bowing or kneeling, being and then also the engagement of the senses, like that lights can provide, or obviously the certain frequencies on the subwoofers can provide, and like, you know, and but also like that we, again, these things are sometimes people will poke at them, and I'm like, I'll poke right back, you know, in this really high setting. We're trying to evoke the same thing. One though is using, or they're using 2 different sets of technology. I will say that I think there's something to like burning a candle versus a can light, like, or even in like an LED. I think I don't think that those are just like a 1-to-1. I think that they do different things. And so just in that way, I think the first problem is for one, you know, for people that are poking at one versus the other. I think that if you have something like super high historical, expensive cathedral downtown X city, and then you have on the edge of town in suburbia, you know, $1 million facility with pardon me,
You're fine.
with you know, like a ton of high-end production equipment, like you've
Mhm.
kind of are doing your goals are very similar actually.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's one thing, but I do not actually, I don't think that they're necessarily completely relative either. I think that different things do different things for us as humans.
Right.
Uh,
And I don't think we're ever going to be in a situation where we're able to employ all the things all the time in the one setting, and I think that's why there's a broad range of, or
yeah,
there should be a broad range of opportunity to employ different levels of,
yeah,
um, of these kinds of things. So it's interesting. Our church is now, like, every year there's sort of like a reset, like they'll do a series on where they're trying to get people to join community groups. You know,
mhm,
again, I really liked this thing that you and Ross talked about, where y'all kind of touched on the small group thing. I have so many thoughts around the way that we do church, but anyway, I digress. And one of the things that they're talking about is that for North Point, and I think this is true for a lot of these modern evangelical churches, or that are definitely centered toward, like, they're trying to reach the lost. Like, that's definitely their mission, is to reach the lost.
evangelicalism,
Yeah,
evangelism,
it is
reach.
lowering the barrier of entry to where someone can literally walk off the street. And this is the kind of the picture that I feel was painted, is that, whenever Jesus, who's a rabbi, who usually is surrounded by, very serious religious followers or whatever, it would always say that the tax collectors and the sinners were gathered around listening. He's talking to his disciples, but they're listening in on a conversation. So his stories and things, that sometimes it would be veiled, like there would be a parable that was more opaque, and even the disciples are like, "What the heck are you even talking about?" And then other times where, like, he's telling these stories, for an agrarian society, that everyone would understand what he's trying to convey deep truths about God in a language that they're going to understand. And so I feel like for North Point, for example, they don't use any kind of language or words around anything in the church that's not in common vernacular, right? So I know a lot of people would have a lot of tension with that. They want to have a separate word, a separate category that shows that this is a set apart thing and it's very different. And I feel that tension. But I also know a ton of people who would never set foot in an Orthodox church for that very reason. There is a fear and apprehension, a feeling that I have to be a certain way to enter, and that I already have to, like, be elevated to, like, there's just such a huge step. I'm going to feel so foreign. And I don't think that we need help making the gospel, like, or following Jesus, difficult. I think, like, just wait a minute, you're going to find out, you know what I mean? Because I think whenever the time comes when someone decides to become a disciple, then okay, well, like, and I think that's what Orthodoxy does really well. They combine the belief, the behavior, and the belonging together. It's like, if when they do their catechisms or whatever, you've opted into something, and with eyes wide open kind of what you're opting into. And then they weave those three elements together, that you're part of the community, your behavior is starting to change and transform, because while you're doing that, your belief grows up with it. And again, I'm going to throw in something different, because this is what my brain does, but it reminds me of, like, Jordan Hall. The thing that I've really been, and Ross said this too, so I was like, okay, I'm not the only person. His conversation around what faith is and understanding what faith means has really been, like, messing with my head. But I think, well, he described it when he was talking to Chad. He described, like, or used the analogy of riding a bike. And that just really struck me. And I think it's so right in a really deep way. So with the catechism, whenever you're opting into actual discipleship of Jesus, you're doing the thing. You're not just reading about the thing, but you're also reading about the thing. And you're doing the thing, and you're doing it within a community. So you have a container for your life that people are holding you while you go through really heavy stuff, hard stuff, whatever. But you're contained, you're held, you're guarded, you're shielded. And the community creates a sort of barrier against the world while you do this. It's like this force around you, so that you because we don't need help with the hard things. Life, it's hard, you know, or we don't need to make it harder is what I'm saying. But the Sunday experience is when you're in their philosophy, I'd say, is that the believers are coming together and it's open to the world to come witness what we do and to hear. So their teachings are not going to be these super deep philosophical, theological, doctrinal things. It's going to be pretty.
Who is they?
Like I would say like a lot of the modern evangelical, you know, churches. And then, of course, the idea is that you get into community and you flush those things out deeper. Now, whether or not that happens is a whole other story. And that's where I tend to be a loudmouth in the church circles about it, because I'm not sure that happens, which is why I'm really interested in what John Mark Comer did at Bridgetown. And he handed it over to Tyler Staton, which I think Tyler Staton's doing a great job too. It's that we've lost some really important things. The world is in desperate need that we demonstrate the power of the life of God in our lives. And these are the tools and these are the things that Jesus did with his disciples that get you there. But the world doesn't need more, I don't want to say like casual, like where's the distinction in our lives? You know what I mean? And I know I just got way off topic, but.
So, I mean, it's kind of like.
Welcome to my brain, by the way.
We kind of were saying that at one point you were kind of saying that the seeker sensitive language of like North Point can be helpful. But then there's also this, but how do we show that we're distinct from the world? And I mean, I kind of harp on that with the movement. That movement is that, and this is that there were these, you know, we talk about like the transcendent nature that music can create. Mm-hmm. And we want it to like take us into something sacred, right?
Yes.
But I kind of struggle to think that it's hard to ultimately get out of that this secular entertainment. I think these moments, but these moments happen. We're trying to do this, but ultimately that the seeker movement, with its forms of iconoclasm, with its form, because we got we don't show any religious image. That's gonna like you're kind of saying that's gonna you know mess with people, and but by doing that, we've kind of like pulled the whole thing out of the sacred, like some parts of the possibility of that. So really, it's like you're competing with NFL and you're competing with Taylor Swift, and that's why I think that part of the call to the churches, and I think, you know, what Comer, I think maybe was trying to do, and what when he's drawing from people like, Eugene Peterson and then Dallas Willard and Robert Foster, like and these are like the kind of Protestant versions of the church fathers, you know, like these ascetic lifestyles and these you know, celebration of the disciplines and practicing the disciplines and the way, like trying to bring this. I would contend that it's that project with if kind of the model doesn't find a way to place things out above kind of the come and see, come and be entertained and get to then participate into a deeper sacred way, that happening in worship, but that also happening, like you were pointing at, within. Does this even happen at small group? We're just saying, come have, you know, let's get together, drink a few beers and let the kids play. And like, what are we really doing? You know, is there a telos more than community? Right. And so, you know, when we've gotten away from Sunday school, so there's not even a telos of education necessarily. So it's so vague that we have problems. And I think that, Comer, you know, is pointing at that, like the people that has followed into that tradition within Protestant evangelicalism, where the way I look at it, because then you talked about Jordan Hall, pistis, faith, the bicycle. So much of that is like Vervaeke's 4 P's of knowing, is like proposition, how do you ride a bike? You pedal, you hold the bars, those are the rules, you keep a balance. Okay, I know that. Now I've got to do it. And then maybe there's also like someone else is doing it, or I'm watching somebody else do it and somebody's watching me do it, and you're oriented in this space, perspectival. And so all those things, but we know what we're trying to do, which is ride a bike. So it's like,
exactly. And that's it. That's, you're totally right. But what are we trying to do?
and
If not ride the damn bike. And so this is these kind of debates or conversations that I have with people. It's like, so, okay. And in the corner, we talked for what, like, I don't know who brought up, like, what is a Christian, right? Is it a cultural distinction? Is it like we generally have these laws and like whatever? Like, so the first believers were called Christians by outsiders, which were little Christ. They were mimicking Christ. They were living like Christ, right? They were called people of the way. Why? Because they lived according to a way that was so different and distinct from culture, right? That's what they were identified by. And I mean, and you lay out like the fruits of the Spirit, whatever. Those were the things. And I don't think that's, we don't seem to even have an expectation that people,
yes.
Yeah. That's the way. And there's nothing distinct. And I don't think it's about the music. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about all the other stuff in between. I think we aren't adequately calling people to a life of, and it's not like asceticism. You have to adopt a style that resists the things of the world, because we know that those aren't the things that we're seeking to fulfill us. We live according to a completely different paradigm. It's not like we're doing this because we're trying to harm ourselves. We're trying to like live meagerly. No, we're trying to live robustly. We're trying to live abundantly according to a different kingdom, according to an actual life. We, before they even, the disciples went out, Jesus had them waiting for a ridiculous amount of time. I don't know why it took that long while they're in the upper room, but it's like, until you have power from on high. Well, what is that? And how many people do you know out there, like even your pastors or whatever, do you look at them and say like, oh, they have power from on high. They're operating out of a different spirit. Their lives are so markedly different. This is what I'm longing for, like communities that like, we want to ride the bike. We don't just want to talk about the bike. I don't just want to watch videos of people who have ridden bikes in the past, or that, like, the whole point should be that we want to ride the bike because that's where life and life abundantly is. And that's what we've been promised. And God damn it, I want it, and I want to be forming communities of people, because there's a lot of hurting people in the world. They need transformation, and we're lying to them if we think you can just come once a week or just, get these little like support groups throughout the week and you'll make some friends who have some similar values as you. No, they're hurting and they need deep transformative work in their lives. And that is the gospel. The gospel is the healing of the nations, and I think where are those leaves? Are they forming on the trees? The healing of the nations. And yeah,
I think the pieces that it brings up for me is something about deep trust. And like, I think things that we've been hitting on, and I use this a lot, is Peugeot's fractal realities, like that these things happen at scales and at all the way down, and then they come up, but it's the same thing. And you could say that's something like communion. You commune with God, maybe at work with your sandwich and your prayer. Like that's a fractal of communion, and it's you and God. Then maybe at the dinner table, with a family, that's then, that's a fractal of the good meal, and there's goodness here, and it's in a community. And then maybe that happens in your potluck, and then, but then it like which is like this more fun and everything. But then like, how do we then take that to like the good meal, the ultimate point of good meal, like at communion, like these fractal things. And I say that just to like go all the way into, like, yes, we should be having rock concerts. Yes, we should be doing these things, but there's like these levels, and maybe there's like a some music in the round, or you and your buddy are in a room, like these things then like scale up, and that there's these places in them. And then also relationally, Jesus wanted to, he had the 1, he had the 2, he had the 12, like, and in our relationships. And then we get up to maybe like the 150 is about what we can handle in our embodied life, and it's like, seeing those, finding, and our world has just said so much of that is arbitrary. And that's what I'm saying is like those, all those examples are kind of like orienting yourself towards a way. I'm not talking about following rules necessarily right now, but there are like,
it's a rule of life. It's not a rule yeah.
And so, and in my own life, so it's one thing to say, we want you to have community, but we're not necessarily saying we want you to build trust. Like maybe that would be a deeper telos to ask, to call people to a deeper way is, this, we imply it with, we want transparency, or we want you to be open, you're sharing these things with like, giving people tools to build trust, because I think that's one of the things is like in the last, decade and a half or so, or decade. And I'm sure you're aware of this in a way, but it's, cause I follow your Twitter, but it's like, where we talk about things, or we watch these things, and it's like someone will be like, yeah, I saw this on X the other day, and you're like, man, I don't know if I want them following my X, because it's like, or so, it's like, and what I'm saying is like, we don't know how we've been robbed because of our access to be able to consume so much. The ability is to simply trust people are gonna care about us, even if we're honest about who we are in a way. And that goes all sorts of places, all sorts of spectrums of politicals and sexuals and blah, blah, blah. It's like all these things. And I think it's hard, in the model of reach as many as you can, grow as many as you can. It's like, we're not that's too fast to foster trust. Trust is built over time, and in concentrated experience over a long period of time, and then even trust in our leaders. He kind of pointed back to that conversation with Ross a couple of times, and even in my own life as failing as a leader in a church, like what is like that holding that office of trust, spiritual trust in people's life. That's, we're not seeing examples like, okay, if these are our examples, these big mega things are our examples, and it's like, well,
yeah. Well, this is a point, like with something that Ross said. It's like, well, we don't need it's not that we need our leaders to dress in a different way. We need them to be in a different way. And, I'm going to kind of go back to that part on like the fractal. Okay. So let's talk about like the breaking bread on a fractal level. The quality of the thing is going to scale all the way up and all the way down. So on the base level, like you personally, when you're breaking your bread, how you break your bread and the whatever, that matters, because you are a stone in that building, right? Yeah. And so the integrity and the quality of your particular stone is what you have control, or you have, I don't want to say control, but you have, that's where your agency lies, right? But there needs to be, and then as it scales up, though, you've brought a quality stone to the table. You've brought a quality whatever. And so then as it scales up with your family, how do you break bread together? Yeah. So what does that look like? And then your broader community, how do you break bread together? And then when you invite people into it, you already have a stable. So you talk about like trust. It's the thing that you get over time is not necessarily better trust, but you get a stability as it goes out. But the stability comes from all the pieces of this organization being solid, integral, like pieces, and then whenever you have enough pieces, when one seems like it needs a little bit more reinforcing, people can gather around and reinforce whatever, but you can kind of address these little parts without the whole thing falling apart. Right.
Who do you want to be when
have a lot of, when all the fractals have like a virus or what, that's where I don't know any tech. I can't use any technical terms. So I need to get away from fractal.
No, I think that was excellent.
But anyway, you just see like, so each individual, there's a certain responsibility and your agency to develop an integrity, a deep trust between yourself and God. And then that starts extending out to your broader relationships within your family, your close friends, your relatives, whatever. And then it gets to where when you have a whole community like that, that practices, first of all, that's a hospitality element to it too. You're breaking bread on a table, which I think is largely missing in the church, because people should not, their first experience to Jesus or whatever should not be Sunday morning. It should be at your kitchen table. It should be, breaking bread with a homeless person or the undesirables or whatever, and learning how to have that integrity there too. But my point is, like, it does scale all the way up. So then the quality of your worship times are also going to be directly related to the quality of your individual personal worship, your community worship, when you guys come together. I do think that will be a felt experience to the people that come from the outside. There will be an authenticity there. There's something solid and a unity of character, of direction, of everything. And
that's that is good. And I liked how you added basically the integral part. Like, it's like doing it, but then also that it has integrity. Because how can you should you expect to, like, okay, I want my family to have a meal that maybe is beautiful and has some sense of, like, a little bit of a liturgy to it, if you aren't practicing that in your own self. And I think that's one thing that has been, at least in my life, like my wife came from a liturgical background. And so doing some like Advent, we do a lot of Advent night wreath lighting and stuff at our house. And it's like, but that's because that was real at a certain level in her life. Like, and then we like brought it down into this level, right. And it was like, I was meeting there too. And that's, and again, like that there's some order to that over time, but, and that you then that's part of like developing a culture too. And, right. But the other part is, this idea of, okay, then it comes together when we get to this space, or even the part about something that was hitting me was like maturity, in a way where sometimes language is used like, oh man, this should be, these are my Christian brethren. This is my Christian community, my whole church. And it's just like, I think there's when you flatten out the meaning and the trust to just be like, and I can trust this people, and I can, that's not actually maybe helpful language to use. Or even that, because we're all Christians and you throw us into a group, then it's just gonna happen because we're Christians. And
right, like, or like in Austin, we have like a plumber. It's like the Christian Brothers plumber, or I don't know. There's like a few businesses where I'm like, you have this sense that people will trust you more when they
Christians Brothers mechanics.
Yeah, we got a lot of those.
And sometimes, that's why I would say, like, if community's the telos, then there you go. Like, throw people in a group, and we are communing together. But something about, trusting God and trusting one another in this, and how do we do that when, if beyond that is then this other telos of sacrifice or something that's a point beyond that's driving us. And those, you said something about whenever maybe someone's structure has had harm or gone through something deep, and they can lean on someone else's like strong integrity. I tried to say it, you're talking, and StreamYard does this weird thing, but it's like, who do you want to be at your father's funeral? Mm-hmm. Like building, and that is kind of this
That's the Jordan Peterson thing, by the way.
The subsidiarity of that kind of fractal all the way up to is how you're structuring your life. And I think it could easily be said that as long as you, and you hit on this earlier in the conversation, like, what is the gospel? It's like, okay, as long as you have the know of the gospel, then, and that's all that, if there's nothing else that matters, then it is hard to get behind giving like tangible to say, you must do this when you're saying like, all you need is this. Then, so if all I need is this, then why should I must do this? And I think that's part of the disconnect on faith that you were referencing earlier too. It's like, no, you must confess your sin.
Right.
Like, but we were like, no, you just believe, just believe something written on a page or something. It's like, I've struggled with that, and I think you were kind of hitting on some of that too.
Well, the faith and the outworkings of faith, they are part and parcel. They are the same thing. They're not separate,
Yeah. Sometimes that's not preached.
Well, there's sometimes a lot of things that aren't preached.
I think maybe there's something like, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that tension out myself. Let's do something maybe a little fun for the folks that might be paying attention to us. How would you describe this little corner of the internet?
Well, I describe it fairly frequently, actually, because I'm starting to think I'm an evangelist. Not really, but so I'm constantly trying to get people to listen. I kind of stopped though because it wasn't working. But I describe it as there's a group of people that sort of orbit around a certain ideas, kind of downstream of Jordan Peterson, where people are like, looking for meaning, the meaning crisis, like all those folk. And that there's all these like little channels that sort of orbit around these kind of main channels, and that we all started talking to each other, and that we're all kind of collectively and intentionally learning how to talk across various ideologies, because we recognize that that's what is necessary, and that's what the world that we live in now is requiring of us, and that we recognize that if we don't learn how to do that, we're all in really big trouble. And I think the Christians of the corner, or people who, or I say like the religious ones of the corner, maybe they feel
God-fearing.
Well, yeah, sure. That they also feel like it's a religious duty and a spiritual practice to learn how to talk across ideologies, to not be possessed by an ideology or those spirits of those ideologies. Which, speaking of X, that's a big part of what I'm working on now too. Yeah, so that's how I describe,
Oh man, who was I listening to describe X as? Oh, so I've got a conversation coming out with a really interesting guy. His name's James Taylor Foreman, and you should go read his. I'll send you his Substack that someone pointed me to have the conversation. And we were talking about egregores and, have you heard that term a little bit?
Yes, but I don't know. I couldn't.
You were describing it basically, that these things like Twitter has a spirit to it, and that it has like,
oh, okay. Yes.
It basically gets manifested, but that, it's so disembodied because it's only the written word. Typically, I mean, there's other aspects of it now, but like, and that you can just, and people have said this, of course, many times, but it brings something out of us so completely different because you're just putting words on a screen and you walk away and then you're back into your kind of like, maybe not so negative life, but that's like, it like channels that thing. So yeah, but so to your point on TLC, I think that was really good. Talking, you didn't specifically say this, but for me, what you highlighted was transcending ideology. Recognizing that it's a reality, but if change or hope is in this world, we've got to figure out how to have that conversation beyond that, because
we're learning to see the people behind those ideologies as actual people, because when we talk about them, or you just like post about them or whatever, you're just sending it out into a void. Now when we're facing each other and talking about them, which is a very different thing, because I'm a person and I might have ideas, but the ideas are not me. And so you should be able to talk about the ideas without feeling personally attacked. And I think we're all learning how to do that, some better than others. And I'm learning from the ones that do better than me, and I have already learned so much, because you have a sense, and this is another thing when I describe the corner, you have a sense of deep care and love. And I see it in the interactions in the comment threads, even when they're like shitting on each other, excuse my language, or in the videos, they'll be like disagreeing with each other. You feel so much love. And then when someone from like lurkerdom, or someone who's been kind of, kind of crappy in the comment sections, when they come on to the video, there's just like this envelopment around them of like, we are genuinely so glad that you're here. I want to see your face. I want to have these conversations. And I've literally cried during streams. Like, my eyes will just like well up because it's so beautiful. And, you just witness something that we like, this is what it's about,
Yeah,
and
that's
I try to do that in my real life too.
Because it is, being downstream from, something like what Jordan Peterson did in the culture, what he provided underneath what he did in the culture, maybe is a better term, but was in a time where basically only ideology was the conversation, was only ideology. That's all you basically saw. The only people that kind of weren't, like Joe Rogan was kind of an analog for that not being what he was doing, but it was so, to a degree, we all slip, we all go in and out, but like,
right. He practiced sort of hospitality and openness, like, come to the table, let's talk about it. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear how you think. I want to introduce you as an actual person behind that idea, and let's hear it,
Yeah. And it was those multiple things. And then somebody kind of like Jordan agree with 100% of what he says or not, was some guy just saying what he thought. And back, it was like, at that time was, it was refreshing, I think, or shocking for people to see someone actually say things out loud that it didn't feel like we were in a space at that time where that was, even
Jordan Peterson, you mean?
Yeah. Even,
I've actually said to the pastor of my church, I'm like, why is Jordan Peterson saying things that we won't even say in church, or where has he gotten the authority to talk about these things? And the church has lost its authority. Yeah,
it's something about courage. There's something there,
well, and I think too that get back to the fractal thing. I mean, I think we don't feel like we are like, we have this robust, I don't want to say army behind us, but but that's kind of the courage that you feel, I think too, when you step out, is that you've got that container behind you that's protecting you. And I think too, like, what are we pointing back at? There's just the experience that I've had out in the world a lot. It's like people just pointing back to the church or to Christians that they know or whatever. And it's like, if there's any point of my where my faith really falters, or I start having like serious doubts when I lay in bed at night, it's the church, it's the people. And I'm just like, is any of this true? If none of, like, why? Because sometimes I'll be like, is any of this true? Like, the church is such a mess. We're such a mess. Like, anyway, but so I understand their doubts when I don't know why that made me think of that, but yeah, Jordan Peterson.
I don't know. I can't remember the timeline for you, like when you encountered him, what you were going through.
Pretty much the very beginning.
But what you were going through at the time, when you, like, what headspace you were in. I don't recall specifically, or life experience space.
I had been outside of the church for a very long time. I had started, like, really, like I told you, went onto this like deep dive of like trying to get healing, and had some success with it.
Psychological help, right?
Yeah, and I kept really trying to convince myself that I did not miss Jesus, but I did. I never aligned myself with the deconstructors. That's another thing. I've always been a person. It's just, I think my personality, I always find the in-between space of things. If there's an argument, I find myself somewhere in the in-between, like mediating two different ideas, or that's why the chaos is inside of me. I think a lot of times is because, so I was in that in-between space of like, I just had walked away, whatever, and I was trying to like sort through all this stuff, but every single road just kept leading back to him. I'd be like, oh wait, that's something that I knew before. And my husband would make comments, like whenever he was mad at me or something, he would say something like, I liked you better when you were a Christian, or you were better when you were a Christian. And it stuck with me because there was something very true. And the thing is, I was listening to Sam Harris. I was listening to all the meta crisis people. And like, that was my like deep dive, like rabbit hole thing, like with all the portal and with what's his name, the Weinsteins and anyone that he interviewed, I'd go like listen to I'm like that. Like I'm obsessive like that, you know, like the Daniel Schmachtenberger stuff. Like I got so into that for a really long time. Anyway, so we had my dad's best friend when they were in ministry. They both like fell away. And my dad came back. His friend did not. His friend went on. He's a genius, like a literal genius. He was a farm boy running a tractor in Southern Illinois who got interested in like astronomy. I have to make sure I get that word right. Not astrology, astronomy. Started reading all these textbooks, taught himself all the sciences, started building telescopes, ended up building telescopes for NASA. He became the superintendent of the observatory at Vanderbilt University, like brilliant guy. So his son, who like we grew up that same generation of like Jesus movement parents or whatever. And he had been just this rabid atheist, and he got married and started having very different thoughts about stuff. And like he and his wife, he'd bring his family to come visit my dad every summer. They wanted to spend time with us. Like we're their family too, you know? And so we started having these conversations, and I'm in that in-between space. I'm a post-Christian, if you will. And we're talking about all these things about meaning and whatever. And he looks at me and he was like, have you ever heard of Jordan Peterson? And I was like, no. And he said, he just did this interview on Joe Rogan. You've got to listen to it. And so he sent it to me. I was wrapped. And I mean, I can almost remember like where I was with my like AirPods listening to, and I was like, who is this guy? Like I never hear anyone talk like this anymore. And it was giving me kind of like old, like preacher vibes. You know what I mean? I felt like I was listening to like a Wesley sermon at some points or something, you know? Anyway. And that was my entry point. And then it was just like, I found out he had, you know, lectures online. So listened to it, just devoured those, all of his maps of meaning stuff. And then there was the biblical lectures that ruined me, you know. I remember called my brother, who is super like, and he's like a super intellect, but like also post-Christian, really into Sam Harris at this point, dabbling in like the new atheism thing, which is why I think it was like so important when Jordan went head to head with that. I think people had never heard those ideas done justice up against the greatest like anti-Christian force that we have or had at that time. And so listening to them duke it out and like catching all the nuances of where the holes were in their arguments was just fascinating and so important. Anyway, I told my brother, I'm listening to this Genesis series by this psychologist, you know, and I said, I feel like my faith, my belief, all that stuff was like a shipwreck that I barely escaped with my life. But at the same time, the treasure was on that ship. And I just never thought I was going to be able to find a way to retrieve it. And I feel like this guy just gave me a way to get that treasure and like to separate out the precious from the worthless. And that's exactly how I described it to my brother. And so that was my entry and my huge thank you to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, that's poetic, you know, that way. And mine was a little different. Mine had more to do with the learning how to take responsibility. Like my faith didn't deconstruct. It was basically all I had left. And so it was like the rebuilding of life with learning to take responsibility for action and for the truth and these things in life. But I think that is That's just so fascinating that you can get on. There's this space that's kind of in that, as Grimm says, in the wake of Peterson, and it's like,
I wish I knew y'all existed back then. That would have been way more fun.
well, nobody did. I mean, that's the thing. I think that's, though, in Peugeot's term, that was the low guy, the knowledge and the wisdom going out, and it planted the seeds, and the seeds grew and matured, and then
our little root systems underground started finding each other.
Yeah. And then 6 months ago, you and I popped on. That was a question I had for you, was what drew you out? Like, I don't know if you teased that out specifically in that original story or not, but I couldn't remember. So I was like, what made you hit record, that first time? What was
man. Yeah. So you said about waves. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff that
I
you
didn't
said.
either. I didn't
about waves of obsession or anything. So I had stumbled onto Paul Vanderklay. And of course I do most of it auditorily. I don't watch videos, or I hadn't been at that point, because of like the way my life is, like I'm on the grill and all that stuff. And, but I was really wanting to have some conversations about some C.S. Lewis stuff that I was reading. And I kept trying to get people in my real life to read it, or to I wanted to have conversations. Couldn't find that. I started looking for podcasts of that where it was like a book club or something. Couldn't find it. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll try YouTube. And I went on YouTube just searching for C.S. Lewis. And I think I was reading, it was one of the trilogy books, and, saw Paul Vanderklay's video. And, I almost didn't click on it because of the, just like even subconsciously, you're like looking for like a more polished looking, I don't know why we do that. But I clicked on it. And as soon as he started talking, I was like he would reference other writers or things that and I could just tell he had this undergirded, like deep knowledge that he was drawing on. So when he's discussing it as at a much higher level. And, so yeah, then it just kept going, watching more of his videos. And then I was like, I need to see if there's a podcast, because I can't watch all these videos. So then I just pretty much went exclusively to podcasts. But during the podcast, you could tell he was pointing at videos or people or clips or whatever. And I even tried to find, he would talk about Chad the alcoholic. So I would look for a podcast. I'm like, who's this Chad the alcoholic guy? Couldn't find him. So it was funny because I just didn't have I had no reference for an online YouTube community. So I didn't know what was happening. And I don't know, I must have seen and I started commenting on his videos. And I was like a little, what are those little yappy dogs, I would be just yapping at him like he was we were on Twitter or something. And then one time he actually replied to me, and then someone else replied to me, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I started having a conversation, And then I think I found him on Twitter, and I started harassing him there too. And he finally just he was like, will you please DM me? And so I DM'd him, and he said, I think we should do a rando and I was like, or whatever. I didn't know what it was even really at that time. And then at first I was like, sure. And then I was like, the more I thought about it, of course, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm stupid. I don't really know anything. I don't know why he would want to talk to me. And I started having all those insecure thoughts. And, but that's when I started looking up to watch his randos. And then in the waiting space before I did a rando, that's when I started actually really engaging and talking and consuming a bunch of the more satellite orbiting channels. And yeah, so and then he did and it was right around this time that he, and see, I thought he had actually lost interest and we weren't going to do a rando anymore. I was like, okay, he's seeing me on Twitter. He doesn't like me anymore. So I really thought that. And so I had moved on from thinking that we were actually going to have a conversation. And by this point too, I didn't even want to talk about the things I thought I wanted to talk about. And he said something about he must have been talking about waves of obsession or something about these randos coming out of lurkerdom. And I was like, I was so scared, by the way, of posting that video. And I just did. I was like, I'm just going to do it. So that's, yeah. And then of course, get all the butterflies. I've gotten over this a little bit, but shortly after that, I'm listening to him on the podcast, and he said my name or something. oh my gosh, I nearly like had a car accident because I felt so exposed, And I was like, it wasn't a podcast. I was actually the YouTube video because I looked down and then I saw a clip of my video on there and I was like, oh no, dear God. But I've mostly gotten over that.
I had some similar, that was kind of a similar thing as far as like when I did the speed randos, because I was already just like,
I saw it. I was like, it's such a shame. Like, I shouldn't be on here ahead of Christian Baxter. He's trying so hard.
Yeah, trying so hard. That's embarrassing. But yeah, I was.
Somebody has to, Christian, and like you've got the whole like fancy setup, which I think is wonderful. But someone has to try hard, and you got to start somewhere. So
yeah, what I was kind of gonna go to is like, I think you've done you've tried to do some other social media stuff in the past, like did you have like a cooking thing? Did I look up a cooking thing? Was that you?
I hope not.
No,
I don't think so.
Maybe I'm thinking.
I don't know. I've never really had the bandwidth to spend. I mean, for as long as I can remember. I mean, I have 3 small young kids. They're bigger now, but and then having our own businesses, I don't have a sit down life.
Got you. So social media, yeah, that hasn't been. Christian's trying so hard while I'm so embarrassed. But
no, it's not. That's not bad. It's not bad.
Well, the thing was it was like a huge exhale. Like there's been like no other place, and I'm just like I'm gonna start telling my stories, and there was a ton of dopamine, like you're saying, it's like this like cycle, and then you're like, oh, there's all this interesting stuff, and I had my life had been structured into such a way, like for the last 5 years, like I've worked only 3 or 4 days a week, and the other part of my life.
What is that like?
I'm a nurse. It's I do things other people don't want to do for those 3 days a week, but
I do a lot of things that nobody wants to do. Believe me.
But
I'd like to do them 4 or 5 days a week, not 6 or 7.
Well, yeah. So part of it too then was like, well, I have this time, and I built this space, and I was like, and there's
studio, huh? Like,
yeah, and there's something
you could record, like a recording studio, right? You could record in there.
Yeah, I had to reset this setup that we're doing right now, because last night I had some kids up here, some of my daughter's friends, and they were up here doing the whole thing and having fun. I can do 5 stereo in-ear mixes in here, and I've got drums and everything.
Nice.
So it's fun. But yeah, so I had this space, and I had bought a camera the year before. I shot 1 podcast with a friend. I had a slump that made me kind of get depressed, and I just couldn't get it. But then when this happened,
that was recent, right? Because I heard, was that recent? Because I think it was referenced in one of the
my buddy Bill, I did that. He does cycling. We used to be in a band together. A year ago, we shot a podcast episode about his previous ride that he had done, like 200 miles, and he lost like 100 pounds, and we were talking about lifestyle change and all that stuff, and I was just trying to like figure out if this is something. I had another idea, but when this kind of started rolling, it kind of made more sense, because when I thought about it, it's like, even with music and production, it's like, what have I done the last 7 years? I've done more of this up here probably than anything else that I've done, like downstream from Peterson, and like I have hour long commutes to work there and back, hour there, hour back, or more now right now. And it's like, what was I doing? I was like letting the algo feed me the next Peterson, Peugeot, blah, 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 and just going. Right. And there are other things, but so when I sat, it made more sense to like try to connect the creative energy to this space. And then the other piece of it, which you may get some of this more directly, like, when I was doing like gigging, worship leader, weekends, and all that kind of stuff, I had this real, like, I can't really say that I really want to do this, because if I say that, then that it's too important, and then it's an idol, and it's like, but really there's this deep part, like huge parts, like, no, this is what I want to do. But it's like, if I say that too much, then people
Which part, the music part, or the
like I want, and so then you kind of
because then there's like I'm gonna go for it.
I'm
gonna be trying, And
Yeah, I'm gonna
trying
be
feels like there's
trying,
something about trying that does feel a little bit embarrassing.
and feels like in the world that is in, like you're making an idol out of something.
Hmm.
You know, you could get into like, oh, well, this is too important to me, or like,
Unfortunately, that's how I did in my youth. And I mean, I say unfortunately, my husband reminded me last night. He was like, your life has taken the path it's taken for a reason, and you don't know what that would have done to you when you were younger.
yes,
The things that it's doing to me now at 40 makes me think of like what it would have done to me when I was younger,
yeah. So, I didn't have any real success, but I mean, it was a real part of my income. It was a real part. Like I like depended on that part of my life. And, but then with this, but there was always, like I said, there was always this kind of, you can't really say how you really feel about this in a way. And that led into all other parts of my life. It was like a pattern.
In the worship capacity.
Yeah. Because if I'm serious about how, like, then I'm doing it wrong or something. I'm because like, it's like this idea that it's an idol. If I love this, then it's an idol. And so then with this, it was kind of like, oh, Chad's doing a podcast. Like, I might could do a podcast. I want to keep talking to people about this stuff. Like, and I'm watching Girl Country and all that stuff. And, I think that part of this is just like you're saying, like people are looking for that conversation. But then, I was like, and I ended up having a month off of work, and I just was like, I'm just going to do this like a job. And so I just, and I got on Twitter and I was just like messaging people, hey, you want to come on my podcast? You want to do this? And I don't care because it's like, I'm too old to care anymore if this is something that
right? Well, you're not old enough. You're not 40 yet. You got a little ways to go before you get to that level of wisdom that I've achieved.
Yeah, a whole Southern
youth, I've got the wisdom. Just kidding. No, I totally hear you. It's funny because, before I found this, whatever, I had a friend call me. She's a little bit older, brilliant girl. And it's funny because she was one of the only people, like women, that likes to talk about stuff that I like to talk about. And she called me, and she actually left me like a million voice message, like memos or whatever, being like, Emily, I know what you need to do. You've got to have a YouTube channel. And she started telling me how she's figured out the algorithms, and she like has a whole way. She's like, I want to just like teach you how to do it because it has been so fulfilling. And then she was like, you are going to have to sell your soul a little bit. Okay. And she was like, you're going to have to talk about celebrities, and you're going to, she started like kind of like, and she was like, I know you're not going to have an easy time doing that, but I really think you need to do this. And she was telling me how she was making so much income out of it. Talking celebrity gossip. Like it was during the whole like Amber Heard, Johnny Depp thing, whatever, which she would like, she's so smart. So she has like this, she could talk about it very intelligently with like all this psychology, whatever. And it's kind of funny because I've had multiple people trying to tell me to do the same thing. And of course I don't have time for it no matter what. Like even if I wanted to, or, but yeah, and I can see though how it would be. Yeah, I'd have a lot of like self-consciousness or whatever to overcome that. Like, and I've heard you talk a little bit about, some of that I'm sure creeps up for you too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're not just talking to one person, which I like before yesterday, I had to talk to myself about this. I'm like, because when you think for a second that that the conversation is being witnessed by a bunch of people whose worldviews you can't control and you don't have any, that's so overwhelming. And I think I would freeze. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with that? Like when you talk about stuff, not being constantly aware, or do you just kind of like push that to the side, or how do you deal with that? Or is that a problem for you?
I think I do try to be careful with my words. There's certain ways in how I've said things, or, that because I mean, I'm thinking more maybe about like to a degree, like my life and my family or something. And with other people, I'm not a combative, or I'm not looking to get into arguments, and like that's right. Like low on my priority. So that's the vibe that I'm not.
It's my job. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Like, I'm actually not, like, I don't know. This
Well,
race
I get
thing is,
so to that point is just that, yeah, I'm careful. I try to be, I'm careful to a degree because I'm thinking about that. But there's the other part of me, that's the part that doesn't care, is I'm not trying to impress in the way that it's like, oh, I've got to do whatever people on YouTube are doing, or like I've got to make a thumbnail like this or like that. I'm just like, this is just what comes, and I'm not, I'll get better at it along the way, but I'm not. I just want to do this.
so you don't have a fear of like being nitpicked, like in the comments, that people are going to start finding faults or criticizing things that you've said, or be taking it the wrong way, or feeling stupid. That's another thing. Like, I have to deal with this like idea of, or the
I'll be honest,
fear of being stupid is like, has to be way up there.
Somebody who I like.
I can't help it because I say a lot of stupid stuff. So it's like, get over it, Emily.
Some of the people, someone that I like on this internet space is Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom.
Yeah, I listened to a ton of him.
And one time he said, I've done, the way that I've gotten to where I'm at is like constantly being the dumbest person in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, I don't read a lot. I've been exposed to a lot. I've been deep in certain culture, and I have experience, but I'm not going to be the guy that can reference 10 quotes from this thing and just like accepting that about myself and be like, this is an opportunity. If someone's willing to sit down and talk to me for an hour and a half or 2 hours, that this is an opportunity that I'm going to learn. And I also look at it like, Joe Rogan was the first person to the gold rush. I'm late. I'm very late. And I accept that I'm very late to the gold rush of like what he has been able to gain as a person through 2 and 3 hour conversations is something that most people will never have the opportunity to experience. And he even does most of them, embody. And so like, I just see it as an opportunity to, I'm a curious person, and I'm getting gold because I get to have this, like, I get to experience this on quote unquote my terms. And so I'm going to probably people are getting plenty of meaning out of it, the people that are pay attention to this, but that's kind of part of how I look at that. And the other piece of it is the self-conscious part that I referenced earlier about how I feel like I have to be a certain kind of Christian person to, this isn't about the money, or this isn't about the status, or this isn't, it's like, it's about all of it. It's about all of it, and being honest, like, and all the, the not even $50 that I've made since I've been having memberships. Christian's really into and most of that was from Upcycle, gifting people membership.
He's so sweet. Like, I love it. It's like Upcycle.
So I haven't even really done.
He's so sweet, by the way. Like, I just love that guy. When I just see his name, I just feel happy. I just love him.
Yeah, and so that's that piece of just not like, I'm not going to say, I don't want to, I only want to do randos. I don't want to talk to people with status. I'm like, yeah, I want to talk to people with status. I don't care. Like,
they have status for a reason. And like, it's like, also there are various markers of success and how we determine if what we're doing is successful, how many people want to listen, why.
Yeah. So that's a real feedback mechanism, regardless of if it's flawed or not. Right. And so, that's been how I've tried to approach this, and I actually, some of Grimm's explicit grifting has actually, I think that's
giving you permission. You feel like
permission is not the right word, but a model of just saying, like, you don't have, like, I did like my first, like, hey, like a community post, and I said, warning, grift ahead. Like, hey, that's just real. Like, instead of being like, I'm going to try to make it seem like I'm not grifting, but I am. Like, I don't know. Those things, I think that, I guess you could call that authenticity or whatever that he does in that way.
Or it's like kind of like a little bit poking fun at yourself, like kind of getting to the punch before someone else can, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if I see this in myself, it's like, I might as well just say it. And and not pretending
it's honest to the reality of it. I'm investing my time in doing this. If you think if what I'm doing is meaningful and worth it, and if you're able to contribute or you want more of it, then you can pay a little bit more for this or whatever,
Yeah. And I think there's also reality. Like I'm having my first membership conversation like right after this one, like with a guy who, he bought a membership level that was like once a month conversation. And it's like,
you're my only one. So hope you can talk every month.
Yeah. But regardless, it's also just like, I'm playing like this, like approaching it like, okay, like your friend who said, I feel like I have to sell, you might feel like you have to sell your soul. It's like, instead of doing that, just be like, try to get to that space of like, I just want to play like people that have that opportunity. Like, oh man, when I had one of my first conversations, a guy, Pete from Strange Theology, was like, he listened to these podcasts, like, man, I wish I was in that conversation. I was in that conversation. It's like, I was like, well,
get in the conversation.
Yeah. And so instead of wishing I was, continuing to only consume, but to participate. And with that, there comes a lot of things. And it's like, so that's kind of where I'm coming from with all that. And I approached it a lot differently when I was trying to do, like I said, like the worship leader market, make a CD and all, but I've got to be this, spiritual person that doesn't care about anything else. And I don't know.
Yeah. It's totally off topic, but it's something that I struggle with a lot, I think, with what I do now. It's like on one hand, there's a little bit of it's not like any other space, where the feedback, you know what I mean? It's like, how do I know if I'm, or like, am I just on a roster of talent? And if you get someone better than me, will I just get bumped down? Or yeah.
You mean like in the corner?
No, I know. Well, I'm sure everywhere, but
I'm
thinking about like my role in the church, like where I am now.
Yeah. That's one of those things about. So a buddy of mine was he was a worship leader at a church in South Carolina called New Spring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of it. They were kind of like Elevation, but they had Perry Noble was the pastor. He had a big fallout, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago.
Of course.
And then but he was at one of their small, satellite campuses of 1,000 people, and type thing, and there is a reality to like, am I going to age out of relevance when relevance is the certain place on the stack? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so he ended up getting out. There were for other reasons, because the church, after that downfall or whatever, struggling and whatever, and it's just he made a different career choice. And but that definitely was a conversation. And even now, like when you said, have you heard the song Pieces? Like, man, I don't even keep up like with that, which used to be like part of my job. And so that is a difficult reality.
Well, you lead worship still in your home church, though.
Yeah.
But I guess it's like you doing more like hymns and stuff now, or?
No, I mean, we did like this Sunday, that song "Build My Life" by Pat Barry.
Yeah, the first one I said, I will build my life. That one, upon your love. It is a firm foundation. Yes. That one, yeah.
So yeah, and that's probably a couple years old, but and like we did Highlands by and it's a couple years old.
I'm still learning them, to be honest. When I came in, it was like I didn't know anything that was going on in church music anymore. Like I felt like I was relearning, and they're very different. I mean, it's different. Everything's very different now than it was 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, it sure is. And what's funny though is like I even draw some, like I've given myself permission, because it's not like I'm just doing this thing, and I like, I want to do this song from like 1999, like, and instead of it being hokey, like it had meaning, and I think it had meaning to people in this space, and there's not and it's like, and not, I don't have anyone being like, that's just, like that's not in, or, like that kind of thing. So it's been a good therapeutic process, even just like tending to like myself as the thing, of things that were meaningful to me at different places in my life. And I think other people too. But yeah, the trying to stay, like you were saying, you said something about feeling like, am I going to be bumped by X, Y, and Z? Yeah. And someone a better vocalist, or,
because there always is, I'm going to say that too about, you made me think, my dad died almost 3 years ago, like on July 16th, it'll be 3 years. And it's part of like the whole arc of my story. It's very much like related to him. It's so funny how so much of my life ended up patterning after him, even like the falling away for a certain, like being super passionate in ministry, reading everything, then falling away, then coming back, and it looking very different, very humbled the second time round. But even before he became a believer, he was like in rock and roll bands, and he would always tell me, like, he was so sad that I stopped playing music, and he was always trying to encourage me. And so like anytime we get together, I would like, humor him by like, let's play music. We sang like at a wedding or did some stuff here and there. But it, like, as soon as he passed away, it's like the first thing I thought about was like, I know, like, first of all, I wish I would have done more music with him because it made him so happy. And just the sadness that part of me that I loved so much, I never found a place for it. I just had like this instant kind of sadness, but he always would say, Emily, do not be like me. I was so afraid that I wasn't ever good enough. There's always somebody better than me. Why bother? And he was like, just don't be like me, because it's the thing, like, you clearly know that you love it, and you can't just compare yourself to how there's so many other people that do it so much better, whatever. He's like, because you have a particular unique, not just gift, but where your life intersects with the world around you is unique, and only you're doing that thing,
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I did not pursue it, absolutely any of this. Never thought I'm going to do music again, especially not in a religious capacity. And so at his memorial, this is another thing, and I said this in my rando too, but I kid you not, it was like 7 or 8 years, my dad kept saying, I just want you to come to this church. I promise it's different. You can come the way you are. There, and he's talking about how good the music was. And it was like one of the best musicians in Austin was, directing. And a girl was singing from America. She was on American Idol, and another one that was on like The Voice. And I mean, so I'd go and I'd watch, and I'd tell my dad, like, there's absolutely no way I'm ever going to do music with these people. First of all, I suck. That's all I could think is like, I'm terrible. I'm like, it's never going to happen, Dad. And I just said, it's never going to happen. I remember saying those words to him, and he's like, well, I just, and he tried to encourage me and like, whatever. And then, so yeah, fast forward, I'm singing at his memorial, and that guy and the girl from American Idol, whatever, they're there. They sang a song, which, by the way, they sang a Keith Green song. They did, When I Hear the Praises Start. We requested it, and he did like his own like rendition of it. It was so powerful and beautiful. But it was a song that our family really loved, like the message of it. It's like, my son, why are you striving? You can't, and when I hear the praises start, it's like the idea that our lives are always so connected with music and worship. He's like, but when I hear you worship, I want to rain upon you. And my dad had always described when he would lead worship that he just felt the pleasure of God on him, and I also felt that. So anyway, so that song was meaningful to us anyway. And I sang some songs that my dad had written, and it was like a few weeks went by and they reached out to me, and it was the weirdest thing ever. But those moments where you feel like you've almost been like struck by God, like the hand of God came on you so hard, and you're just like, and I knew it was either you in or you out. And it had nothing to do with the music. And I knew that in the moment, but that God knew exactly what to do to grab me and to make sure that I knew that that was him, because it was so so unlikely, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, like after that, it was a complete mess. Every single time I sang, I was like, well, that's the last time we're doing this. And I probably misunderstood God on this whole deal because they think I'm better than I am. And this is wrong. And I was just waiting for it to be, oh God.
Oh no.
You're doing to me.
Your computer cuts off quick.
No warning. I was just like, oh my God. Anyway,
So,
I don't know what I was saying. The point
you
is,
were talking about just it was like the Eric Little thing of when your dad said, when I sing and I lead worship, I feel the pleasure of God. When I run, I feel God's pleasure. Emily inherited that from her family or from her dad, and I think that one of the pieces I caught as I was listening back to parts of your rando with Paul was you said when I lost basically like your faith in God, you lost music too. Like I had that experience in my life with losing that office of being fired from being a worship leader. Like it was I kind of lost music for about 4 years.
yeah.
And it's a healing process, and that sounds like that was the beginning of that healing in your life, and you're getting to enjoy the pleasure of connecting music with God, and it is a gift. And I've got another meeting coming up, so I'm gonna have to wind this thing down, but I want to encourage people to check out Food Truck Emily's YouTube channel, because she actually has a song on there that she did that's really beautiful. And
Hey, you know who commented recently was Dog Bark. And I was like, hey, Dog Bark. And he said, let's sing together. And he said, Paul will set it up. And I was like, I will be.
Paul, his agent.
Yeah. And I was
That's
like, well,
awesome.
that was so sweet. I was like, hi, Dog Bark. I love him. Anyway. Well,
Well,
thank you so
Yeah.
much for even wanting to talk to me. I hope we touched on stuff that you wanted to talk about.
Definitely. And we didn't really hit on the women in the corner, but that was, maybe that'll make sense again in the future. And I think that
well, whatever. Maybe we're just doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe we're just bringing women in the corner.
Yeah, we're just doing it. We're not talking about it.
Exactly. We're riding the bike.
All right. Well, on that note, stick around and we'll close this thing out.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Bye.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection are truly meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and believe that these discussions bring real value to your life, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Your feedback and interaction are crucial in making this space even more meaningful. Also, I've opened up channel memberships on YouTube. By joining, we can foster a stronger community of connection and support the continuation of more conversation craft. Membership is set up to foster this in 3 ways. Level 1, connect via members-only community posts for channel feedback, behind-the-scenes moments, and supportive membership branding on comments. In addition, Level 2, get to watch podcasts a week before they air, along with other unique members-only videos. At Level 3, join scheduled, monthly focused small group discussions with other kindred spirits from all over the world. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. Together, we can cultivate meaningful, supportive digital community right here in this little corner of the internet. We'll see you next time.